Hey guys, tonight we travel to a world without smartphones, wristwatches, or that infuriating microwave clock that's always blinking, 12 o'clock. You're standing barefoot on warm, cracked earth under a sky that hasn't seen electricity. The sun is barely up, and a breeze carries the scent of baked clay and barley porridge. Somewhere nearby, a goat is already judging you. Welcome to ancient Mesopotamia, where people woke up because the gods, or maybe a very loud neighbor, said so. This is a time when you couldn't just hit snooze. If you didn't rise with the city might rise without you. And trust me, in a place where water arrived by canal and food depended on perfectly timed planting seasons, being late wasn't just embarrassing, it could get you exiled or, worse, reassigned to the fish cleaning district. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, let me know where you're listening from and what time it is right now. I always love seeing your time zones drifting in from all corners of the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You squint through the sun haze, rubbing your eyes with dusty palms. The morning heat isn't yet unbearable, but you know it will be. People are already stirring. Clay ovens hiss. Temple doors groan open. The priestly timekeepers, yes, those existed, have already begun their strange rituals of measuring water drops or eyeing the horizon for the precise angle of the sun's rays. And yet, you wonder, how did anyone know when to start the day? See, the Mesopotamians lived in one of the earliest known civilizations, between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. It was a fertile land, surprisingly structured, and deeply obsessed with time. Not time like we know it, seconds, minutes, hours, but time marked by the natural rhythms of wind, water, stars, and occasional goat-related chaos. Here, time was mostly the domain of the gods. The Sumerians, Babylonians, and Assyrians believed the gods quite literally scheduled your day. If it rained, it was because a god felt emotional. If your field failed, it was probably because you forgot an offering last Thursday. And if the moon vanished? Well, don't even ask. This divine timekeeping meant people looked skyward and earthward simultaneously. You could tell time by how your shadow stretched across a courtyard or by how many droplets of water had leaked from one ceramic bowl to another. The earliest alarm clocks, in a sense, were not mechanical, they were elemental. And let's talk about roosters. Contrary to the popular cartoon cliché, roosters weren't always the morning MVPs. In Mesopotamia, you were more likely to be awakened by a priest chanting, a neighbor clanging a pot, or someone yelling about spilled grain. Historians still argue whether organized morning wake-up calls existed or whether every family relied on their own grumpy grandparent to do the job. You shuffle past a row of huts. The smells of breakfast, grains, onions, something possibly fermented, waft into your nose. A woman brushes a clay threshold with a straw broom. A boy chases a goat who absolutely does not want to be milked. And somewhere, a water clock, called a clepsydra, gurgles quietly, counting the moments like a ticking heartbeat of the day. You spot a scribe, already hard at work. His waxed beard glistens. He's hunched over a tablet, eyes narrow. Maybe he's keeping time by tracking the sun's position against a wall, an early form of the sundial. Or maybe he's doodling. Historians still argue whether some of these tablets were records or ancient to-do lists, complete with squiggly, remind me to sacrifice sheep, notes. And then there's the temple. Temples were the central hubs, not just religiously, but bureaucratically. Timekeeping often fell to the priesthood. If you thought your office calendar was a mess, imagine managing a lunar calendar, for major deities, seasonal flooding, and everyone's birthdays, all without a single post-it note. These priests used astronomical events to chart rituals, manage planting cycles, and yes, rouse sleepy citizens. They observed solstices, equinoxes, and star patterns. In some cities, they even used systems of incense timed to burn in precise intervals, functioning as both sacred offerings and time markers. Imagine setting your morning incense stick instead of an iPhone alarm. There's a certain stillness to the Mesopotamian morning. And you feel it. The air thick with dust and potential. The certainty that, even without clocks, everyone seems to know exactly what time it is: breakfast o'clock, barley counting hour, or goat retrieval minute. You settle under a shade awning, sipping tepid water from a clay cup, and realize, time in Mesopotamia isn't just about hours. It's about harmony. The rhythm of the river. The flow of daily life. The heartbeat of a civilization learning how to mark moments, not just rush through them. And while today you might argue with your smart speaker about daylight saving, back then, you'd have been lucky if your reed calendar didn't dissolve in a rainstorm. Still, as you sit in that ancient hum, a quiet respect grows. These people didn't just observe time, they invented it. And they did it with sticks, stars, smoke, and soggy clay. You lean back against a mud brick wall, letting the rough texture press into your shoulders as your eyes follow the priest on the temple stairs. He's muttering something rhythmic, probably a chant, possibly just grumbling about being awake before sunrise. In his hand, he holds a vessel filled with water. Slowly, methodically, he tips it into a stone bowl with a tiny hole in the bottom. Drop by drop, the water seeps out, an ancient countdown in fluid form. Congratulations, you're now watching one of humanity's earliest alarm clocks in action. This little contraption, the clepsydra, or water clock, is deceptively simple: measure time based on how long it takes water to drain. No snooze button. No annoying beeping. Just the sound of slow trickling, like nature whispering, "Get up, or you'll miss your turn in the barley queue." You watch as the bowl empties, and a temple boy nearby strikes a small gong, a dull, brassy sound that echoes through the courtyard. This, you realize, is not just ritual. It's schedule. Workers in the fields know when to start because the gong tells them. Vendors open their stalls. A fishmonger throws water over his head with theatrical flair and begins shouting about eels. You suspect he does this every morning, regardless of whether the eels are actually fresh. Historians still argue whether these water clocks were standardized or if each city had its own quirky method. Some evidence points to different hole sizes in different regions, suggesting a Mesopotamian version of time zones, or possibly just very competitive priests. The clepsydra wasn't just about waking people up. It also structured the entire day. In temples and courts, water clocks measured how long someone could speak. Yes, timed arguments were a thing. Imagine a legal battle where your defense literally ran dry. "Sorry, your bowl is empty, please stop yelling about your stolen ox." You trail behind a procession now. A group of apprentices, sleepy-eyed and slouching, carry baskets and tools. Their leader occasionally glances at the sky. You try to mimic his squint. He's not checking the weather, he's timing the sun. High noon will hit when the temple's shadow points directly between two carved lions. That's their version of lunchtime. There's something oddly satisfying about it. No ticking. No buzzing. Just the world, casting shadows and whispering the hour through water, smoke, and sun. You pass by a household with a line of incense sticks jammed into a clay dish. As each one burns down, it marks a new task: grind grain, feed animals, complain about your neighbor's laundry. It's the original to-do list scented with frankincense. And speaking of neighbors, did you know that some Mesopotamians may have used human alarms? One fringe theory suggests certain cities employed young runners who would go house to house at designated times, knocking or shouting to wake residents. Kind of like an ancient paperboy mixed with a very determined rooster. You chuckle as a little boy tugs on your robe, points to the sun, and announces something in a proud, high-pitched voice. You don't catch the words, but the gesture is clear: you're late. He scampers off, possibly to become the world's youngest time cop. As the day grows brighter, so do the streets. Market stalls bloom open like flowers. Bakers fan their ovens. A man balancing a tray of honeyed flatbreads narrowly avoids stepping in donkey droppings, divine intervention, you're sure. You pause, sniff, and seriously consider stealing breakfast. But the thought fades as you catch sight of a merchant with a curious object on display, a sun disk, mounted on a base, with a raised pointer. Could this be an early sundial? You sidle closer. The merchant nods knowingly, though he might just be trying to sell you something. He lifts the disk to align it with the sun, and the pointer's shadow lands on a scratch-marked edge. You can't read the symbols, but the concept is clear. Time by shadow. Daylight dissected into moments. No batteries required. Historians still debate whether sundials in Mesopotamia were widely used or reserved for elites. Some say they were crude and mostly ornamental. Others argue they were precise enough for rituals, legal sessions, and even predicting eclipses. You're no expert, but as the shadow creeps, the marketplace comes alive like clockwork. Either everyone's really good at guessing, or this thing actually works. Further down, you spot another timekeeper, this one less holy, more sweaty. A foreman shouts instructions to a line of laborers stacking mud bricks. He doesn't check a clock. He squints at the sun, eyes a nearby pillar's shadow, and mutters, "Half work done." You wonder if he invented the first coffee break. You sit for a moment on a low step, overwhelmed not by noise but by the rhythm. Everything seems intentional. There are no wasted minutes. No one staring blankly at an hourglass app. Just movement, memory, and an uncanny ability to guess time by how hot your armpits feel. That said, Mesopotamian time wasn't always punctual. Rainstorms could ruin sundials. Dust could clog water clocks. And sometimes, people just ignored everything and followed their stomachs. One fringe belief claims a few cities synchronized routines based on temple meals. When the priests ate, everyone else knew it was chow time. Not a bad system if you enjoy scheduling your day around someone else's snack. By mid-morning, the smells shift, more cooked meats now, fewer raw onions. Birds gather near rooftops. The city thrums with purpose. And despite the lack of Apple Watches, everyone seems to know where to be. The farmer heads for the irrigation fields. The scribe returns to his shady nook. And you? You find yourself strangely relaxed, moving in sync with this strange, slow, sacred clockwork. So you walk on, feet dusty, eyes following the angle of the sun as it slides across temple stones like the hand of a god nudging you gently forward. You head toward the ziggurat's base, where the air grows warm with the scent of baked clay and animal sweat. The stairs here are massive, meant to impress more than assist, each one tall enough to force your thighs into a grumble. Up and up you go, passing elders with scrolls tucked under their arms and barefoot children chasing a goat that clearly has better things to do. The day's heat is beginning to press in, and already your tunic clings to your back like a needy ex. At the summit platform, you squint into the distance. Below lies the city, Uruk, or maybe you are, depending on where your sleepy mind has landed tonight. The difference, honestly, won't matter by the time you hit REM sleep. Down there, life pulses through narrow alleys and sun-bleached courtyards. And somewhere in all that dust and pottery, a tiny revolution is happening, time is being tracked. A priest approaches, swaying with purpose. He carries a board engraved with rows of cuneiform, and next to him walks a younger man juggling a bowl, a reed stylus, and what looks suspiciously like a headache. They settle at a shaded bench, unrolling the schedule of temple offerings. The timing of sacrifices is precise, not for the gods, you suspect, but for the priests. After all, someone has to make sure the goat gets roasted before the sun dries out the herbs. And here's where things get interesting. The Mesopotamians didn't just wing it, they divided the day into segments. Scholars call these divisions temporal hours, and they weren't equal like today's hours. Nope. They stretched or shrank depending on the season. Longer daylight meant longer daytime hours. You imagine trying to explain this to a modern teenager. Yes, sweetie, it's a 90-minute hour today. Enjoy algebra. Historians still argue whether the division was consistent across city-states. Some evidence suggests Babylon had 12 daylight hours and 12 nighttime ones, regardless of season, but others claim they flexed the math like temporal yoga. Either way, they created a concept of time that bent with nature, not against it. You ease into a nearby shade, leaning against a sandstone block that radiates a gentle warmth. A breeze wafts past, carrying the scent of dates and dried fish, an odd combo that somehow works, like dipping French fries into ice cream. A scribe begins to read aloud from a tablet, his voice slow and steady. He's not performing. He's measuring. Each word, each pause, fits into a rhythm, an invisible metronome guided by a timekeeper just out of frame. Some believe Mesopotamians used chants as timers, reciting known phrases that took precise lengths to deliver. Think of it like singing, "Happy Birthday," while washing your hands, only with fewer germs and more divine oversight. And here's a quirky bit, clay tablets found in ruins suggest they timed work shifts using beer. Specifically, the distribution of rations. Workers knew when their tasks began and ended based on when they were handed their allotted jug of fermented barley goodness. This method was wildly popular, obviously, because who wouldn't show up early for clock-in beer? You pass a row of artisans shaping little lions from clay. One of them hums tunelessly while spinning a pot. The others follow the rhythm of his hands, matching their movements to his tempo. It's almost musical. One beats a wooden rod softly on a slab, thunk, thunk, thunk. A natural tempo forms, and suddenly it hits you, this city is alive with ticking sounds. Not mechanical, but organic. Human time. Nearby, a woman selling copper bells demonstrates how she measures time for her boiling dye. She dangles a small weight on a string above the pot, and as it slowly unwinds and drops, it tells her when the cloth is ready. It's simple, and kind of brilliant. You smile. Somewhere in the dusty scrolls of history, this would be categorized under proto-alarm clock. There's no buzz, just a soft plop when the weight hits the rim. Historians still debate whether such time tricks were common knowledge or temple secrets passed down only to elite scribes. But clues keep popping up, sketches of time-marking tools etched on wall shards, symbols beside statues, and even buried under ziggurats. Like an ancient DIY YouTube playlist, hidden from the masses but passed around by those in the know. You move on, following a group of young scribes toward the school quarter. Yes, Mesopotamia had those too. And yes, they were just as torturous as you remember. The boys sit cross-legged, clay tablets on laps, writing down math problems and keeping track of minutes the way you used to count down the seconds to recess. A teacher paces behind them with a long reed in hand, ready to correct anyone who confuses their 60ths. That's right, Mesopotamians used a base 60 system. Not 10. Not even 12. 60. It's why we have 60 minutes in an hour today. You can thank, or blame, them next time your meeting runs long. But why base 60? Historians still argue whether it stemmed from counting finger joints. There are 12 on one hand if you use your thumb as a pointer, or if it was just an elegant way to handle fractions. Either way, these dusty mathematicians made a choice that still shapes our lives 4,000 years later. Because nothing says eternal legacy like making sure you have to round up your pizza delivery to the nearest minute. Back in the temple yard, the incense has burned halfway. Another water bowl is emptied. The rhythm continues. You begin to see it everywhere, rooftop shadows, rhythmic drumming, the flicker of oil lamps marking shifts. It's as if time here isn't a tyrant, but a dance partner. Guiding, not scolding. Suggesting, not commanding. And you, slowly but surely, begin to sway to its pulse. You slide down the sloped stone steps from the ziggurat with the lazy elegance of someone who knows there's no rush, not when you're drifting through history at half speed. The midday heat hums softly around you, thick with baked dust and the whisper of ox carts trundling along the packed earth roads. Somewhere nearby, a child giggles as a stray goat eats a scroll it probably shouldn't. Your next stop. A narrow courtyard tucked between two reed-matted homes where a curious contraption sits on a pedestal. It's not flashy. In fact, it looks like a glorified bowl with a tiny hole in the bottom. But don't let its modesty fool you, this little clay vessel may just be humanity's first alarm clock. It's called a clepsydra, or water clock. The Mesopotamians, clever as always, realized that time could be measured through the steady drip of water escaping from a vessel. They'd fill the bowl, and as water leaked out, markings on the inner wall would reveal how much time had passed. And voila, primitive timekeeping, no gears required. Granted, you'd need someone to squint at it constantly, but hey, that's what apprentices were for. Historians still argue whether these clocks were used daily by common folk or remained the domain of temples and the elite. Some believe water clocks regulated temple prayers or were used during legal proceedings where fairness required a set length of testimony. Imagine a Mesopotamian lawyer yelling, "Your Honor, my client still has 2 drips left." Quirky side note, these weren't silent. Depending on the material, the water made faint gurgling or splashing sounds as it exited. In a quiet room, it would have been oddly soothing. ASMR before microphones. You picture a sleepy priest nodding off during a ritual, jolted awake by a final splash as the last drop lands. You crouch next to the water clock and dip your finger in the bowl. The water's cool, refreshing against the dusty air, and you imagine the temple assistant refilling this again and again through the day, eyes trained on the ever-dropping level like a kid watching the microwave count down his pizza pocket. Nearby, another variant catches your eye. This one is reversed, water slowly enters the bowl rather than leaving it. As the level rises, it touches different etched lines marking intervals. Some scholars believe these were used for scheduling tasks in gardens or workshops. A man with calloused hands explains that when the water touches the 3rd mark, it's time to check the grain mill. You nod, pretending to understand, but your mind wanders to modern kitchen timers. Beep, beep, your barley is ready. As you walk further into the city's heart, you pass a caravan unloading fish and reeds, their schedule suspiciously aligned with the sun's shadow on a nearby wall. Ah yes, sundials. The other ancient go-to for timekeeping. But here's the twist, Mesopotamian sundials weren't circular like the Greek ones you may have seen in museums. Nope. They were flat slabs or vertical rods that cast moving shadows across pre-measured markings. The catch? They only worked when the sun decided to cooperate. Which, to be fair, was most days in this sun-blasted place. Still, cloudy days. Total chaos. You picture 2 scribes arguing. Is it 3rd shadow yet? No, I think that's your elbow. And so, water clocks remained the more reliable, if drippy, option. Historians still debate the exact placement of sundials. Were they centralized in market squares or embedded in temple courtyards? One theory suggests traveling vendors carried pocket-sized versions. Imagine a Mesopotamian version of a smartwatch, but it only works when held precisely perpendicular to the sun. Slightly less convenient than an Apple Watch, but arguably more stylish in raw terracotta. You follow the shadow of the ziggurat now, which has crept across the street like a lazy cat. Time is passing, but here it doesn't chase you, it strolls beside you, humming softly. A man in embroidered linen invites you to his workbench where he's testing another invention, a simple sand timer. Yes, sand. Though more famously used later in Egypt and Rome, Mesopotamians experimented with sand or silt-filled vessels, especially for short tasks like boiling resin or timing prayers. It was trickier than water, since sand could clump or pour too fast depending on the humidity. The man frowns as a clump of moist silt plops instead of flowing. He mutters something about goat urine humidity again. You wisely take a step back. Quirk alert, some versions didn't even use grains. They used tiny pebbles that clicked as they dropped into a lower chamber, more musical than practical. But imagine it, a Mesopotamian monk meditating to the faint plink, plink, plink of stones telling him when to stop chanting. Further along, a young girl is reciting lessons from a clay tablet. Her older brother turns the tablet at timed intervals using a stick. It's a rudimentary study timer. No Pomodoro technique, no 5 minutes on, 5 off. Just eyeballed patience and a rotating tablet. Still, it works. You can't help but wonder if her focus is better than yours ever was, with no phone notifications or snack breaks every 7 seconds. Somewhere behind you, a bell chimes, an actual copper bell struck by hand. It's a signal. Lunch, maybe. Or the shift change for the brick makers. These bells weren't alarms in the modern sense, but they functioned like one. A call to attention. A signal to move. Priests used them to mark prayers. Teachers used them to start lessons. You imagine someone even rang one to tell their neighbor to get out of their barley patch. And here's the core of it, alarm clocks, before they buzzed, rang. Before that, they dripped. Before that, they cast shadows. And before that, someone probably just shouted really loudly and hoped everyone listened. Historians still argue whether the average Mesopotamian lived by these devices or simply followed the sun, the livestock, and the tug of hunger. But the remains are there, in tools, in routines, in schedules etched in clay and passed down for millennia. You find yourself slowing down as you reach the edge of the temple gardens. The water from a nearby irrigation channel gurgles past, its pace steady and rhythmic. A boy nearby tosses flower petals into it, counting softly as each one drifts out of view. It's beautiful. And it's time. Whatever time means now. You settle beneath a wide palm tree now, its leaves rustling just enough to sound like sleepy whispers overhead. The shade feels like a luxury in this sun-streaked city, and you can smell baked figs and warm grain drifting from somewhere nearby. Someone's midday meal, maybe. But you're not eating, you're wandering through time, still marveling at how these ancient people wrangled the hours without digital calendars, phone reminders, or Alexa yelling at them. So what happened when you needed to wake up before sunrise? When water clocks and sundials were still snoring, so to speak? Well, you hired a human alarm clock. No, really. Enter the temple watchmen. These weren't just guys who guarded sacred doors with stern faces and sharp sticks. Some of them doubled as wakers, tasked with rousing priests, bakers, or astronomers at ungodly hours. You imagine one shuffling over to your mat before dawn, gently tapping your shoulder with a reed stick and whispering, "Hey. It's goat milking time." Historians still argue whether this role was formalized or just a convenient use of whoever was already on the night shift. But there are records suggesting a structured system, a rotation, a roster, and probably a few sleepy complaints scratched into tablets. Utuilum overslept again, barley bread burnt. And this brings us to one of the Mesopotamians' most fascinating time tricks. They didn't just measure time, they broke it into parts. Morning, midday, evening, nightfall. But within that, they used something you might call time voices, periodic markers like rooster calls, changing star patterns, shifts in guard duty, and yes, even regulated chants from temple singers. Imagine having to wake up when a guy 3 blocks away starts humming in Sumerian at full volume. It's around now that you begin to notice something unusual. You're hearing rhythm everywhere. The slap of sandals on brick, the steady thunk of a weaver's shuttle, the predictable swish of reed brooms sweeping out courtyards. It's as if the whole city runs on a silent metronome. And perhaps that's not a coincidence. There's a growing theory among scholars, a fringe one, but delightfully quirky, that Mesopotamian life was choreographed like a slow-motion dance. Not just regulated by clocks and bells, but by rituals so rhythmic and widespread that the passing of time was felt in the body. Your muscles remembered when it was time to stretch. Your stomach knew when it was prayer hour. Your ears recognized the distant clang of temple gongs as clearly as any iPhone alarm. A potter gestures to you from his stall. You shuffle over, trying not to trip on the uneven cobbles, and watch as he arranges his daily tools in a neat semicircle. Left to right. Always in the same order. He tells you he starts when the sun reaches the first step of his shadow. No clock needed. Just a consistent relationship between his body, his tools, and the sky. This embodied time, how the Mesopotamians may have felt time instead of watching it tick, makes you think about your own habits. How you wake up with blue light on your face, eat lunch because your phone buzzes, and fall asleep long after the stars would have said, enough. The potter grins and offers you a chunk of date cake. It's sticky, sweet, and somehow tastes exactly how you imagine history should, chewy, earthy, a little messy, but satisfying. You thank him and keep wandering. Up ahead, you pass a row of tiny mud brick homes, each with something curious near the entrance, small hanging vessels, shaped like gourds. A local woman waves and tells you these were used to catch morning dew, and also, according to her grandmother, to gauge the start of day. When the first drop falls, the bread must rise, she says, matter of fact. You blink. Primitive dew-based timekeeping. Brilliant. Slightly unreliable. But brilliant. Historians still debate whether such tools were common among villagers or merely colorful folklore passed down like bedtime tales. But the notion makes you smile. You picture a mother telling her child, when the dew sings, it's time to get up. And the child groaning, rolling over, muttering something like, 5 more drips, Mom. And speaking of mothers, this is where we find one of the oldest, simplest alarm systems, the human voice. Mothers waking children. Masters waking servants. Scribes waking apprentices. No gear, no gadget, just the firm pat of a hand and a voice in your ear. You pass a small courtyard where an older man is rubbing his knees and watching the sun climb. When I was young, he tells you, my grandfather would wake with the dawn and slap the roof with his staff. Everyone on the street knew to start the day. So yes, while water clocks and sundials get the glory, the real alarms of Mesopotamia were much more personal. They were people. And habits. And stars. They were community-born and passed along like shared bread. Oh, and here's your quirky tidbit of the section, there's a Babylonian omen tablet, roughly 3,000 years old, that says if a rooster crows unusually early, a distant relative will visit unexpectedly. Basically, the world's first recorded chicken-based Google Calendar alert. But even with all these wake-up cues, there's one more layer to Mesopotamian time, sleep cycles. The night was divided, too. Into thirds, mostly, what you'd call watches. These night watches were kept by guards, priests, and sometimes star readers who charted constellations as the night rotated above them. A full-time job, staring at the cosmos, marking each star's movement as proof that time hadn't stopped. Some scholars believe these shifts were also used to estimate sleep. People likely slept in segmented patterns, a few hours, a break, then a few more. Waking in the middle of the night wasn't weird, it was expected. You'd get up, stretch, maybe drink something fermented, because of course, chat with family, then fall asleep again. The stars would keep track for you. And if you needed a little help staying on time, there was always that temple guy, whispering in the darkness, hey, your shift starts in 5 drips. You lean back now against a wall still warm from the afternoon sun. Your eyelids feel heavy. The hum of this ancient city, so deliberate and methodical, starts to slow your thoughts. The ticking clocks of today feel distant, faint echoes. Here, you don't count minutes. You feel moments. You awaken, well, not really awaken, just kind of shift mentally, under the same dusty sky, but now the day has stretched itself thin. The sun is hanging low like it's too tired to keep blazing. Everything glows with that golden glaze that makes clay walls look like burnt sugar and shadows look like stretched taffy. And as the city eases into evening, something curious catches your eye. You hear music. Not grand symphonies or lyres being strummed for lovers, but ritualistic tones, calm, repetitive, precise. You follow it like a cat follows a breeze. The sound leads you to a small plaza near a temple, where a group of men in long robes chant in harmony. They stand in a tight circle, their heads bowed slightly, their voices pulsing in intervals. It's not performance, it's timekeeping. These are the temple chanters, and in ancient Mesopotamia, their job was more than spiritual, it was temporal. Their chants divided the day, marked transitions, summoned people to prayer or ceremony, and yes, occasionally jolted a sleepy city into motion. You lean against a column and let the tones wash over you. And then it hits you, these guys are functioning like human grandfather clocks. Historians still argue whether these chants followed a strict hourly rhythm or simply corresponded to key moments, sunrise, grain offerings, evening libations. But the fact remains, this city sounds like it runs on sacred playlists. You remember from earlier, the theory that Mesopotamian time was embodied, rhythmic. And here it is again, loud and low and sacred. Chanting not just for the gods, but for the flow of daily life. Imagine replacing your alarm clock with a deep-throated hymn echoing across mud walls, it is the hour of barley, dear sleeper. Wake up. And you know what? It probably worked better than any snooze button. Some archaeologists have even found small tablets with notations resembling early musical scores. Nothing complex, but enough to suggest standardized tones. These might have been passed from master to apprentice, like recipes, only instead of add cumin, it was hum like this when the third star appears. And don't forget, this isn't just the religious elite at work. This musical timekeeping bled into households. Mothers sang wake-up songs to children. Workers banged pots at certain intervals. A local street vendor might have developed a rhythm, 3 drum hits, before announcing, fresh dates. Get M before the sun hits the temple gate. There's a quirky tale that one Sumerian city had a well-known, drumming baker. Every morning, before first light, he'd pound out a beat on an old grain jar to let people know hot bread was ready. And supposedly, if he overslept, the neighborhood fell into chaos, late priests, unmilked goats, sun offerings made with stale flatbread. You wonder how many apologies had to be sung that day. But back in this moment, the chanting slows. The voices fade, and the plaza empties like sand slipping through fingers. You follow the last robed man as he walks toward a tall ziggurat in the distance. His feet barely disturb the dust. And as you reach the base of that towering structure, you sense another layer of timekeeping entirely, astronomical. Ziggurats weren't just dramatic statements of architectural power. They were celestial billboards. Some had staircases aligned to solstices, top platforms used for watching stars. And for the priestly class, watching the sky wasn't hobbyist stargazing. It was business. Divine business. You climb, slowly, carefully, each step feeling like a heartbeat. The wind picks up, and when you finally reach the summit, the whole city stretches beneath you like a child's drawing. Flat roofs. Distant goats. Faint drumming. And in the east, the first star winks hello. This is when you meet an ummiyah, or scholar priest. He's older, wrapped in layers of linen, and smells faintly of lamp oil and cumin. He doesn't greet you, just gestures upward. We measure time in lights, he murmurs. And you see it now, constellations blooming into view one by one. The Mesopotamians didn't just name stars, they used them. For timing rituals. For predicting floods. For making calendars. Venus, in particular, was their darling. Called Ishtar's star, it was both feared and revered. Its rising marked seasons. Its setting triggered offerings. One clay tablet even notes, when Ishtar glows before dawn, prepare the oxen for plowing. Think about that. A planet became a scheduler. Historians still debate how accurate these observations were, but some surviving star charts are shockingly precise, marking lunar phases, planetary paths, even eclipses. The Mul-Appen tablets, for instance, list dozens of constellations with detail that would make your high school astronomy teacher weep softly into their telescope. But this wasn't science for science's sake. This was cosmic alarm clocking. You're a priest. Better light the incense when Jupiter kisses the horizon. You're a farmer. Don't you dare plant until Sirius climbs above the river reeds. You sit beside the priest, who now begins softly whispering names: the plow, the scorpion's tail, the fish cord. They sound like bedtime stories, don't they? And maybe that's the secret: these people wrap time in narrative. In stars. In voices. So instead of feeling controlled by time, they made it feel like part of them. A living rhythm in the sky. Below, the city starts to dim. Oil lamps flicker to life. Someone plays a flute off-key. A donkey brays in protest. The night is awake, but not loud, just aware. The air cools, and you pull your cloak closer. The priest yawns and leans back, muttering something about the moon's lazy arrival. You chuckle quietly and realize, this isn't boring history. It's symphonic. The instruments are voices and vessels, stars and sand, roosters and rituals. And somehow, in this beautifully chaotic mix, the Mesopotamians built something modernity can only envy: a life deeply in tune with time. And just as your eyelids start to sag again, the priest pokes your shoulder. Don't fall asleep yet, he says with a wink. You'll miss the moon singing. You're still at the top of that ziggurat, sitting beside the murmuring priest under a sky stitched with stars. And yes, the moon does seem to be singing. Not in actual sound, of course, but in rhythm. It rises like it's been waiting backstage all day, lifting itself over the edge of the horizon with slow theatrical grace. A silver curve, shy at first, then bold. As it climbs, the city below falls into deeper stillness. Shadows blur. Lanterns flicker out one by one. A soft wind stirs the date palms near the canals, and somewhere, a distant door creaks like an old storyteller clearing their throat. It's Mesopotamia after dark, and time still ticks, just sleepier now. This is when the night keepers begin their rounds. Not guards exactly, and not quite priests. More like temporal sentinels, people whose job it is to stay awake and monitor the city's pulse through the darkness. They walk softly, carrying oil lanterns and little bundles of tools. One of them has a bowl with floating pebbles. Another, oddly enough, wears a string of dried pomegranate seeds. You trail them from the ziggurat like a curious dust ghost. Their role? To check the flow of night by measuring time through dripping water, candle burn, and moon position. Yeah, it's a bit like that friend who insists they can tell how late it is just by how full the moon looks. Only these folks were officially employed to do that. Historians still argue whether these night keepers were tied strictly to temples or hired privately by wealthy families. Either way, they served a function that bordered on magical: to guard sleep, mark the hours, and occasionally, yes, wake people up. And here's where things get deliciously weird. One of the night keepers stops near a home, checks a copper bowl, and then gently taps a chime. Just once. Soft. But deliberate. From inside, someone stirs, a merchant, maybe. You see a dim shape shuffle to the door and mumble. The night keeper nods and moves on. You realize you've just witnessed the ancient equivalent of a 4 a.m. wake-up call. This wasn't random. Some professions required odd-hour activity: bakers, scribes on moon duty, priests with owl god rituals. Yes, that was a thing. So instead of setting a smartphone alarm, they'd request a night keeper to pass by and do a light knock, a chime ring, or, if they were feeling extra considerate, a whisper through a reed pipe. One old tablet even records the rate for such services: a small handful of barley or a fresh fig in summer. Which sounds absurdly affordable, until you remember that in Mesopotamia, figs were currency and dessert and holy. It's like tipping your Uber driver with a chocolate bar that's also a sacred relic. Now, you move with the night keepers as they snake through alleys. Their path is rhythmic, purposeful, and oddly poetic. You wonder how many secrets they kept. How many dreams they watched over. How many snores they heard and politely ignored. There's a fringe theory, and oh, it's a delightful one, that the Mesopotamians used dream cycles as a kind of timepiece. Not in the modern REM sleep, brainwave measuring sense, but more intuitive. The idea is that certain kinds of dreams were known to occur at certain times of night. If you dreamed of flying fish, maybe it was the second hour after midnight. A storm dream? Closer to dawn. A few carved plaques hint at this. One reads, if the sleeper sees 3 lions on a mountain, the hour is near harvest. Another, more cryptic, says, when silver birds circle the sleeper, the moon waits no more. Sure, it could be poetic fluff. Or it could be the earliest attempt at a dream-based alarm system. Imagine trying to set that on your Apple Watch. Back on the street, a soft clatter draws your attention. One of the night keepers has knocked over a ceramic jar by accident. You expect a rebuke or an annoyed headshake, but instead, the group pauses, and begins whispering. They adjust a small tally on a wax tablet. Apparently, the sound was close enough to a set time signal that they're resyncing their route. And suddenly, you see the logic, every noise, every flicker of moonlight, every bull's shadow on the ground, it's all part of a delicate, improvised dance. The Mesopotamian night isn't just about silence. It's a living clock. You don't count hours by ticking. You feel them. One of the men looks up at the sky and hums. Just once. And it's like a signal. From a nearby rooftop, an old woman tosses a seed bundle onto the ground below. No one reacts with surprise. This too, apparently, is a message. You wonder if it means she needs water, or prayer, or simply wants to mark her hour before sleep. Either way, it's heard, noted, folded into the rhythm. Historians still debate whether such nocturnal coordination was part of formal city planning or a more informal, ritualistic network passed down orally. Some suggest it stemmed from Babylonian astrology, others from Akkadian ritual. But whatever its root, it created a shared language of time, whispered, walked, and never quite written down. And then, you hear it, the one sound you didn't expect. A bird. Just one. Soft and insistent. Not a rooster, not yet. This is a nightjar, called by some the clock bird. It sings in 3 chirps, pauses, then repeats. And the night keepers smile when they hear it. You do too. Because now you know, this is the final stretch before dawn. As you turn the corner, back toward the sleeping heart of the city, the last of the oil lanterns flickers in its jar. The wind carries away some of the smoke. You're walking through a city that never truly sleeps, but also never truly wakes, not all at once. Time here is a tide, and every night keeper is just measuring the ebb and flow. And you, somehow, feel part of it. One final night keeper pats a temple wall gently as he passes, and you wonder if it's a thank you. Maybe to the gods. Maybe to the wall. Maybe to time itself. And then, one last chime. Not a loud one. Just a gentle ding from a bronze bowl. And like a lullaby in reverse, the city prepares for dawn. You barely notice when the sky begins to shift. It starts with a bluish tinge at the edges, like ink diluted with too much water, and then the blackness of the night is quietly rinsed away. It's Mesopotamian dawn now, and the world is stretching. Slowly. Sleepily. Like a cat that spent the night curled in a sun-warmed basket from yesterday. You find yourself back near the ziggurat again, but now everything feels different. The coolness of night is lifting. The air smells of baked clay, dew-damp reeds, and the very faintest trace of yesterday's incense. The night keepers, if you remember them, have vanished into side alleys and quiet homes, their shift complete. But the work of timekeeping isn't over. In fact, it's just switching teams. Because here's the curious thing about Mesopotamian cities, mornings weren't signaled with a single loud alarm. They were layered. First comes the smoke. You smell it before you see it, a soft, dry scent, not like fire, but more like toasted grain and rush stalks. It's the bakers, of course. They've already begun lighting their dome ovens, and little coils of smoke rise from rooftops. Some believe that the very act of this morning smoke was, in itself, a clock. When you saw it rising, you knew it was time to get up. There's even a half-preserved clay cylinder that says, "Let the smoke of the baker be the horn of the day." Not metaphorically. Literally. Before roosters. Before horns. Before bells. The smell of hot bread was the first alarm. Can you imagine? Waking not to buzzing or beeping, but to the scent of barley loaves crisping in ancient stone ovens. Honestly, you might never hit snooze again. Now, a few streets over, someone begins to sing. It's not quite a song, really. More of a chant, low, gravelly, and repeating the same few lines over and over. It echoes off the mud brick walls and slides under wooden shutters. It's a laborer, signaling his crew to start the day's irrigation check. A sort of human ringtone. And as he walks, more voices join him, not in harmony, but in purpose. This is the second layer of the city's awakening. This practice wasn't entirely personal either. Historians still argue whether these wake chant routes were officially assigned or more of a local tradition. Some say guild leaders coordinated it. Others think it evolved naturally in neighborhoods where loud noises were discouraged but gentle repetition was tolerated. Either way, you get the sense that waking up in ancient Mesopotamia was a group project. Nobody was left to their own devices, mostly because devices didn't exist yet. Instead, you had smoke, voices, and a deep sense of communal rhythm. If your neighbor stirred, you probably would too. If your neighbor slept in, well, you might all end up behind on your barley accounting. And then, just when you think this morning ritual is complete, you hear the third layer. The animals. A donkey begins braying, followed by a cacophony of sheep and goats. Somewhere, chickens flutter noisily from their roost. But the surprising part? Some of this was deliberate. Mesopotamian households often placed certain animals near windows or alleyways specifically because their noise patterns could serve as time markers. Want an early wake-up? Put the loudest rooster closest to your courtyard wall. There's even a comically tiny tablet fragment that reads, "To wake before sun, place the goat near the door." Whether that was serious advice or a sassy neighbor's suggestion is still up for debate. But weirder still, there are traces of trained animal behavior, too. Birds taught to chirp at sunup, dogs that barked after the baker's smoke rose, and even monkeys, yes, monkeys, conditioned to rattle small gourd instruments when the light shifted. Fringe theory? Sure. But remember, this is the same civilization that invented cuneiform and board games. They were clever. Boredom was not an option. So here you are, standing in a city that's not awake because of clocks, but because everything around you acts like one. A woman pours water into a clay basin and mutters to herself. A boy sharpens a reed stylus on stone, preparing for school. Somewhere, a priest lights the first ceremonial fire of the day. And woven through it all is this invisible but unmistakable tempo. You're not being told it's morning. You know it in your bones. It's the closest thing we've seen to a living clock. And then, as if to put a cherry on top, you hear something that feels incredibly modern, except it's not. A shopkeeper strikes a chime. Not just any chime. It's a hollow disc of bronze suspended from a ceiling beam. He taps it once with a rod, producing a clear, ringing note. And it's not just noise. This is how he opens shop. Everyone nearby hears the chime and knows his stall is now open for business. Some temples used the same technique. A chime meant prayer was about to begin. A deeper one meant preparation for sacrifice. Over time, certain tones developed associations with certain times of day. A high chime. Dawn ritual. Low. Midday offering. Twin chimes in sequence. Evening closure. There's even evidence from Akkadian poems that certain bells were forged with intent to carry the voice of morning across the river. It's oddly poetic, and surprisingly practical. And yes, historians still debate whether these chimes were strictly religious tools or more commercial. You can almost picture a priest arguing with a vendor over bell rights. "Your chime sounds too sacred, it's scaring off my fig buyers." Still, it all fits the theme. In Mesopotamia, the morning wasn't something you just woke up to. It was orchestrated. Not by one instrument, but by dozens, layered like a symphony. And you're floating through it, unhurried, eyes half closed, like someone listening to a lullaby played in reverse. You follow a small girl as she balances on one foot, trying to put on a sandal. Her mother is muttering something about missing figs. Down the street, a man curses as he drops a bundle of reeds into the canal. And just behind them, a dog barks, not at anything in particular, just because it's time. And that's the point, really. Everything in this world seems to know what time it is. Even if no one owns a clock. Now, as the day slowly spreads its fingers of sunlight across the land, you feel yourself gently pulled further into the daily rhythms of this Mesopotamian world. The cacophony of animal calls, chimes, and rising smoke fades into the background, and the real action begins. People move from their homes, some carrying offerings to the temple, others heading toward the bustling marketplaces, while the water carriers plod slowly along, their leather buckets clinking with each step. It's here, in these marketplaces, that time takes on a more human form. No longer do you rely on the smell of bread or the sound of chimes. Now, you can see time unfold. Everything is accounted for in this great human dance, merchants haggling, children running, workers busying themselves with tasks. Everything has its place in the orderly march of the day. The fact is, time wasn't just something that hovered in the air or burned into the morning sky. Time was something that could be measured. And it's here, amid the clamor of trade, that the Mesopotamians start tinkering with more concrete ways to measure it. It wasn't just about the sounds and smells anymore. It was about visible tools, tools that could measure time in fixed intervals. That's where the first actual timepiece comes into play, the shadow clock. You can imagine it now, can't you? A simple wooden board, tilted at just the right angle. Its long stick, called a gnomon, pierces the air, and the shadow it casts shifts slowly as the sun moves across the sky. This was Mesopotamia's first real effort at measuring time. It wasn't about hours yet, but more about the stages of the day. Morning. That's when the shadow first appears. Midday. That's when the shadow shrinks into itself. The sunset. It stretches long and languid, like a final sigh. Historians still debate the exact nature of these early shadow clocks. Some believe they were mostly used in religious settings, priests and scribes noting down the hours between rituals. Others insist that the clock was far more widespread, used by the common folk to keep track of when to water crops, when to eat, or when to pull out the tools for making clay bricks. Either way, these early sundials marked a shift from the natural flow of time, dictated by sun and stars, to a more human-centered schedule. But, of course, the Mesopotamians were never content with just one way of measuring time. Why settle for something so simple as the sun's shadow, when you could invent something even better? That's when they took it to the next level, the water clock. Water clocks are as clever as they sound. You've seen those old-fashioned hourglasses, right? The ones with sand slowly trickling from one side to the other. Well, water clocks were a bit like that, but instead of sand, they used water. The design was simple but effective. You'd have a container, sometimes a large jar, sometimes a shallow bowl, filled with water. A small hole at the bottom allowed the water to trickle out, and over time, the changing water levels indicated the passage of time. It was an idea borrowed from nature. Rain collects in rivers, and the water moves with a steady rhythm. So why not harness that natural rhythm to measure time? These clocks were surprisingly accurate for their time. They didn't measure hours down to the minute, but they could mark the important moments, like when the sun was directly overhead, or when a meeting had gone on long enough. But, as with everything the Mesopotamians did, there were quirks. Water clocks were finicky, too much water, and they overflowed. Too little, and they didn't measure time properly. So, the clever engineers in the ancient cities would adjust the hole's size or use different materials for the containers. It was a bit like trying to get the perfect amount of water in your morning tea kettle. Too much, and it overflows. Too little, and the whistle never blows. Even more fascinating, though, was how these water clocks found their way into temples and palaces. Some of the most well-documented examples come from the great ziggurats, towering pyramid-like temples where priests kept a strict schedule of rituals. These water clocks helped them time their prayers, making sure the gods didn't have to wait. Imagine the priest, sitting by the temple door, watching as the water slowly drips, counting down to the moment when the sacred ceremonies could begin. He couldn't afford to be late. The gods would certainly take notice of that. Historians still argue whether these water clocks were used more for ceremonial purposes or for everyday use. Some insist that they were strictly religious tools, while others believe they were part of the daily rhythm of life for all classes. It's a fascinating debate because it tells us so much about how time was intertwined with every aspect of life in ancient Mesopotamia, from the sacred to the mundane. As you stand there, amidst the hustle and bustle of the marketplace, you start to realize just how thoroughly time had become ingrained in this society. It was everywhere, from the shadows on the ground to the steady trickle of water in the temples. It wasn't just a concept anymore. Time was tangible. But don't be fooled, Mesopotamians weren't the only ones thinking about time. The Egyptians were already using their own version of a sundial, and the Greeks were getting ready to put the finishing touches on their own clocks. Time was in the air, in the rivers, in the sun, and it was only going to get more precise. But as you wander through the streets, passing vendors selling everything from textiles to pottery, you can't help but wonder, how would the world change when the ticking of the clock wasn't just in the sky or in the river, but in the hands of every single person? The thought drifts through your mind, but the market's busy hum pulls you back into the present, where time is slipping by, measured not by the hour, but by the weight of the day itself. As the sun's rays start to soften and the day shifts into the cooler, gentler moments of evening, the bustling marketplace slows. The water clocks, shadow clocks, and sundials, once measuring each passing moment, now fade into the background. But you can sense it, time is still there, quietly pushing everything forward, guiding the rhythms of both the temple and the village. You feel the subtle tension in the air as you begin to notice the sense of urgency building. There's something important on the horizon. Something big. And, sure enough, it's the arrival of a new invention, one that will change the entire way people view time. This is the moment when the Mesopotamians decide to divide time itself. Before we get into the mechanics, though, let's take a deep breath. Picture yourself watching a grand feast in the courtyard of a massive ziggurat. The nobles are seated, their servants running back and forth with goblets of wine and platters of food. You watch as the priests move through the crowd, not with a haphazard sense of time, but with a purpose, each one carefully watching the progression of the evening. The air is thick with the scent of spices, and you can feel the anticipation building. This is more than just dinner. This is a ritual, and everything must be done at the right time. Now, as the evening moves forward, it's as if the shadows themselves are calling out the hours. The once vague concept of a little while ago or soon has now been narrowed down. No longer are people simply aware of the passing of day and night, they are defining it. Historians generally agree that the division of time into smaller, more manageable units comes from the Mesopotamians' obsession with numbers. Specifically, the number 60. Yes, 60, just like the 60 seconds in a minute or the 60 minutes in an hour, all of which find their origins in this ancient culture. Now, you might wonder, why 60? Why not 10, or some other round number? Well, historians still debate the exact reasoning behind the Mesopotamians' choice. Some argue that it was purely practical. The number 60 has so many divisors, making it a highly flexible base for dividing time, angles, and even currency. Others insist it was a combination of mathematical necessity and cosmic significance. 60, after all, is a number that can be evenly divided by 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10, 12, 15, 20, and 30. It's the ultimate, divisible, number, which made it incredibly convenient for trade, astronomy, and, of course, keeping track of the passing hours. But whether it was cosmic wisdom or just an advanced understanding of math, the shift to a 60-based system of timekeeping is groundbreaking. This is where we begin to see the division of the day into hours, minutes, and seconds. Let's pause for a moment and think about how this must have felt to the people of ancient Mesopotamia. Imagine suddenly being told that time isn't just something that happens, it's something you can measure, down to the very second. It's a big shift, and it must have felt almost magical. These newly minted hours became more than just a way to structure the day, they became a symbol of order, control, and progress. Time was no longer a vague, abstract notion dictated by the sun's arc or the flow of a river. Time was something you could hold, something you could command, something you could divide into precise, manageable chunks. Imagine the power that came with that. And with the division of time into hours and minutes, the Mesopotamians could synchronize not just rituals or work schedules, but entire communities. It allowed the priests to plan ceremonies with exactness. It allowed merchants to know precisely when to trade, and the laborers could count their hours with unprecedented accuracy. At this point, we can start to see the profound impact that the invention of these time divisions would have on daily life. No longer was everything linked to the natural rhythms of the sun or the moon. Now, the rhythm of life could be tied to a clock, a more mechanical, reliable force. And yet, there were still no mechanical clocks, not yet. For now, it's still the simple sundial or the water clock that guides the Mesopotamians, but they are inching closer to something much bigger, the eventual creation of mechanical timepieces that will span millennia. Let's pause and reflect on something a little quirky here. While the Mesopotamians were busy dividing up their hours, they also started to divide up their night. You see, while the day had its fixed hours, the night wasn't quite so easily measured. Some scholars suggest that Mesopotamians divided the night into 12 parts, based on the moon's movements, giving rise to the 12 hours of the night. However, there's still debate about how consistent this practice was, especially since the length of the night changes with the seasons. It's a fun little mystery wrapped up in ancient history. Meanwhile, in temples and palaces, you can almost hear the low hum of excitement. People are starting to realize that with these divisions of time, life is becoming more predictable. And that predictability is both a blessing and a curse. It's comforting, yes, to know exactly when the next ritual will begin, or when your crops should be watered, but there's a trade-off. The more time becomes a measurable entity, the more you begin to be controlled by it. The Mesopotamians might not have known it at the time, but this division of time, this standardization of the hours, would lay the groundwork for all modern timekeeping. The ticking clock on the wall in your house, the time you spend checking your watch, the precise moments you plan your day around, all of these have their origins in ancient Mesopotamia. And so, in the flickering light of oil lamps and the soft murmur of distant voices, time begins its march forward, carving out new rhythms for life in Mesopotamia. It's a fascinating, subtle shift, yet one that would change everything. As the days in Mesopotamia stretch on, you start to feel a subtle shift in the air. The people's relationship with time has grown deeper, more integrated into every moment of their lives. No longer are they simply observing the passing of the seasons, or the movements of the stars. Now, they're organizing, regulating, and structuring their days with a precision that's unheard of in previous generations. Imagine the scene: you're standing in the shadow of one of the grand ziggurats, watching as merchants and scribes bustle about. There's a sort of rhythm to their movements now. They're no longer just reacting to the world around them, but following schedules, planning for the day ahead. The urgency is palpable. It's as if the entire city is a giant clockwork machine, each part moving in synchrony. But this newfound precision doesn't come without its problems. Time, which was once an organic force, something fluid, malleable, shaped by the natural world, has now been transformed into something rigid, something that can be measured and quantified down to the smallest fraction. This shift brings a certain pressure. Life begins to feel like it's being driven by time, not the other way around. This newfound sense of urgency begins to permeate everything. The priests, once free to perform their rituals when the time felt right, now find themselves bound by schedules. Farmers must plant crops at specific moments of the day, based on when the sun reaches a particular point in the sky. Even social events and ceremonies are becoming more regimented. It's a marked departure from the more organic, unpredictable rhythms that defined life before. But then, something happens. Something that will drastically change the way Mesopotamians think about time. They developed the first mechanical clock, a device that doesn't just track the movements of the sun or the flow of water, but actively measures time in a more precise, controlled way. Now, take a moment to imagine yourself standing in the dusty courtyard of a Mesopotamian workshop. The scent of burnt metal and oil fills the air as a team of engineers gathers around a strange device. It's a crude contraption at first glance, a series of gears and weights, a small water-powered mechanism, or perhaps even a metal cylinder designed to make a loud noise when it's time for something to happen. You can hear the chatter and laughter of the engineers as they tweak the machine, testing it over and over again. Finally, it works. The first mechanical clock is born. It's simple, perhaps rudimentary by modern standards, but for the people of ancient Mesopotamia, it is revolutionary. Historians generally agree that the Mesopotamians' early mechanical clocks were primarily used for religious and civic purposes. The priests would use the clocks to time ceremonies, ensuring that each moment of the ritual was performed exactly as prescribed. The temples, the beating heart of Mesopotamian culture, are now synchronized to the tick of a clock. But these mechanical clocks aren't just limited to religious uses. They begin to spread into other aspects of life, particularly in the growing urban centers of the time. City dwellers now have a more tangible way to mark their days. These clocks are used to time everything from work hours to family gatherings, marking a new era where the day is no longer dictated solely by the sun, but by the precise ticking of a machine. But don't get too comfortable. While mechanical clocks are a big step forward, they're not perfect. In fact, some scholars suggest that early mechanical clocks were wildly inaccurate. They were prone to malfunction, and the way they measured time wasn't nearly as precise as the systems we use today. The ticking might be more regular than a sundial, but these clocks still had a long way to go before they could compete with the perfect precision of modern timekeeping. You can almost imagine the frustration of the engineers who built these clocks. After all, they've gone from using water and the sun to something that should be far more reliable, but it's still not quite there. But this is where the Mesopotamians' ingenuity shines through. As imperfect as these early clocks were, they represented a turning point in human history. They were the first steps toward the time-based society we live in today. But let's not forget the quirky side of history. These early mechanical clocks were often powered by water or weights, and they would sometimes malfunction in dramatic, almost comical ways. Imagine being a priest in the middle of a ceremony, only to have your clock suddenly burst into a loud noise, startling everyone. Or picture a merchant trying to time the perfect moment to make a deal, only to have his clock go haywire and miss the mark entirely. It's a reminder that, as much as humans try to control time, it always has a way of surprising us. Despite these early hiccups, the mechanical clock is a major leap forward. It's not just a symbol of human ingenuity, it's a symbol of our desire to control time, to tame it, and to shape it into something we can use to organize our lives. And although these clocks weren't perfect, they would set the stage for the more advanced timekeeping devices that would follow, from the water-powered clocks of ancient China to the mechanical clocks of medieval Europe. Historians still argue about the exact origins of the mechanical clock, with some pointing to ancient China, while others insist it was the Mesopotamians who first created the device. But one thing is certain, the invention of the mechanical clock marked the beginning of a new era in human history, where time became something we could measure, control, and, in a sense, master. As the night settles in, you feel the weight of these inventions around you. The mechanical clock has begun to change the way people live. Life is no longer dictated by the sun, the moon, or the stars. Now, it is measured by a small, ticking machine, one that marks the passage of time with a precision that the people of Mesopotamia could hardly have imagined. But for all its advantages, the mechanical clock also brings with it a sense of unease, a sense that time, once a natural force, is now something we control. You're beginning to feel the subtle changes in the air, the weight of time settling more heavily on the shoulders of Mesopotamians. Their world is now driven by the ticking of machines, by the loud clanging of clocks that dominate both the temples and marketplaces. You can hear the soft hum of the early water clocks, and see the occasional flutter of a merchant glancing up at one of these mechanical wonders, wondering if it's time to make a move. Time is no longer the unpredictable force that it once was, it's become something more rigid, something more controlled. But despite all these changes, one thing remains constant: the desire to measure and organize time is still driven by a deep need for order. Humans crave structure. They long to shape the world around them in ways that make sense, in ways that create predictability. And in ancient Mesopotamia, time, once this fluid concept tied to the heavens and the natural world, now starts to feel like something that can be divided, segmented, and, perhaps most importantly, controlled. You can almost imagine the inner workings of a Mesopotamian city at night. The streets are dark except for the flickering oil lamps casting soft pools of light. In the distance, you hear the faint echo of the mechanical clocks ticking, measuring the hours and minutes. Inside homes and workplaces, people are adjusting to their new lives. Merchants no longer wait for the sun to rise before beginning their trades, they consult their clocks, ensuring they're awake at the precise moment to begin. The workers, once free to work at their own pace, now fall into the rhythms of the clock, laboring until the gears tell them it's time to stop. But with this newfound precision comes a shift in how people think about the passing of time. In the past, it was natural, time simply happened. The sun rose, the moon shifted, and the seasons passed. Now, however, there's a pressing awareness of every passing second, every tick and tock. It's as if the concept of living in the moment is being gradually replaced with the urgency of efficiency. The ticking clock seems to hang over every head, driving people forward, pushing them into a future where time must be optimized. You may wonder, what did the common people think of these new devices? Certainly, the priests and scholars, with their access to education and resources, saw the value of these clocks. They were able to incorporate them into their rituals, their calculations, their understanding of the world. But the average person, who didn't have the luxury of scribes or temples, might have felt a little differently about the new, ticking devices. Some may have marveled at the efficiency, enjoying the new sense of order in their day. Others, though, might have found themselves resenting the intrusion of the clock, which made every moment feel more accountable. The clock might have turned every minute into a reminder that life was becoming more rigid, less free. And while the mechanical clock continued to evolve and spread, it also sparked new debates about the relationship between humans and time. Was it a tool to enhance life, giving people more control over their day-to-day activities? Or was it a force that ultimately began to rob people of their natural rhythms and freedom? Historians still debate the role of the clock in shaping human behavior. Some argue that it was a necessary innovation that paved the way for modern society, enabling progress and growth. Others, however, believe that the obsession with time is part of a larger societal trend toward mechanization and regulation, where humans have increasingly become slaves to the clock instead of being masters of their own destinies. At this point, you're standing at the heart of a bustling Mesopotamian city, taking in the hustle and bustle around you. The market square is alive with the sounds of bartering, the clatter of goods, the rustle of traders' robes. But now, there's a new element to the scene, the clocks. You can hear their ticks, punctuating the air with a steady beat. The workers, the traders, even the farmers, all are starting to live in harmony with the clock's rhythm. These new timekeeping devices are transforming the very fabric of Mesopotamian society, and it's happening slowly, almost imperceptibly. Every tick, every tock, is a reminder that time is no longer just something that happens around us. It's something we can capture, organize, and control. The days of simple cycles governed by the sun are becoming a distant memory, replaced by the strict, mechanical ticking that will govern humanity for centuries to come. It's hard not to feel the sense of awe in the air as you watch the clocks tick away. The people of Mesopotamia are now standing at the threshold of a new era, an era where time will no longer be a natural force that's simply observed. It will be something that can be measured, quantified, and, above all, controlled. And yet, despite the amazing strides in timekeeping, there's still one question hanging in the air: have the people of Mesopotamia truly mastered time, or are they now trapped by it? The next few centuries will answer that question, as the mechanical clock continues its slow evolution across civilizations. As you continue your journey through time, the streets of Mesopotamia seem to hum with a quiet energy, powered by the ticking clocks that now regulate the rhythm of everyday life. The buzz of trade and the murmur of chatter are accompanied by a new sound, the steady, measured tick-tock of the water clocks. These clocks, once the domain of the elite and the scholarly, are now slowly spreading to other corners of society. The impact of this technology is undeniable. The entire city is beginning to shift in its awareness of time, and no one seems immune to its influence. You've seen the priestess rise early each day to prepare for her sacred duties. She consults the water clock to make sure she's on time for the morning rituals, just as the merchants line up at the market square before the first tick of the hour. Even the farmers in the fields are becoming more attuned to the passing of minutes. You might feel the shift as you wander past the bustling grain markets. The once chaotic mess of people coming and going, with no real sense of time, has now turned into a more organized dance, each movement calibrated and synchronized to the beat of the clocks. In these moments, you begin to understand the deep irony of the situation. Time, once an uncontrollable force dictated by nature, is now something that is measured by the tick of mechanical devices. Yet with this control over time comes a new tension. The rhythm of life has changed. The gentle, natural flow of hours governed by the rising and setting of the sun has now been replaced with the cold, relentless ticking of machines that never stop. You can almost sense the subtle strain it places on the people. They've gained control over their schedules, but they've also lost something that can't be easily measured. There's no longer any room for the unpredictable spontaneity of life. Now, everything is predictable. Every moment is accounted for. Historians still argue whether this new control over time enhanced human progress or stifled creativity and spontaneity. Some argue that the precision of these clocks paved the way for great civilizations, enabling trade, scientific discovery, and even the rise of empires. Others, though, argue that the clock stripped humanity of its connection to the natural world, replacing the organic flow of life with the mechanized pace of industry and productivity. You feel the shift as you stand in the city square, watching the merchants and workers bustle about, all seemingly synchronized by these timepieces. The ringing of the clocks now punctuates the air like an ever-present drumbeat, a reminder that time is always ticking away. No longer is the day divided by the sun's movements or the cycles of the moon. Now, it's the tick-tock of the clock that reigns supreme. You can't help but wonder, with all this new technology, did the people of Mesopotamia gain anything beyond precision? Was there something lost in this process? The water clocks, while brilliant in their design, have also brought with them a subtle yet undeniable change in how people view their relationship to time. Time is no longer something that just passes, it's something you can control, something you can organize. But with that control comes an increasing need to be on time for everything. In many ways, the Mesopotamians were the first to confront the question that continues to haunt us today: can we truly master time? Or does the mastery of time ultimately end up controlling us? You think about how your own life is shaped by schedules, deadlines, and the ticking of the clock. Are you living your life to its fullest, or are you just racing against time? As you wander through the streets, observing the daily life unfolding around you, you realize that the answer to this question will never be simple. Time, like everything else, is a double-edged sword. For all its advantages, it also brings with it a certain weight, a constant pressure to conform, to keep pace, to be on time. It's easy to romanticize the past, to imagine that life was simpler, more carefree before the clock became such an essential part of life. But the truth is that Mesopotamians, for all their innovations, were already feeling the strain of living in a world governed by time. As you reflect on this, you catch a glimpse of the future, an era where clocks will become more refined, where time will be measured with such precision that it becomes an invisible force, an ever-present backdrop to life. The mechanical clock may have started in Mesopotamia, but its legacy will spread far and wide, shaping the future of civilizations in ways that the people of ancient Mesopotamia could never have imagined. In many ways, the water clock is just the beginning. The tick-tock of time will soon be amplified by the rise of mechanical clocks in Europe, the development of wristwatches, and eventually, the digital clocks that guide our every moment today. You can't help but marvel at how a simple innovation, the desire to control time, has had such a profound effect on humanity. From the ancient cities of Mesopotamia to the modern world, the ticking clock has been a constant companion, shaping our lives in ways both subtle and profound. And so, as you watch the sun set over the city, you realize that while the clocks of Mesopotamia have brought order and precision, they've also started a journey that will continue to unfold as long as humans continue to measure the passing of time. As the sun sets over the Mesopotamian skyline, the first stars begin to twinkle in the sky, but it's not just the celestial bodies that are being counted. The people of this ancient city, who once lived by the rhythm of natural cycles, now find themselves in a world dominated by clocks and timekeeping. This era, once dictated by the cycles of the sun and moon, has been irrevocably altered by the rise of mechanical time measurement. But you've noticed something interesting: amid all this growing precision, the people still seem to have a deep, almost spiritual relationship with the passage of time. It's not just a tool for work or trade, it's something more. The way the priests and scribes pore over their calendars, the way they track the moon's phases, time is sacred here. Yet, as the water clocks continue their gentle tick-tock, you can feel a quiet tension in the air. You wander into one of the temple courtyards, where a group of scribes is gathered. Their heads are bent over clay tablets, and their eyes flicker to the water clock positioned near the altar. Time, as they understand it, isn't just an abstract concept, it's a divine force that governs the universe. They believe that by understanding the rhythms of time, they can unlock the mysteries of the cosmos. The precision of the clock, for them, becomes a metaphor for the precision of the universe itself. And yet, you can't help but wonder, how much of their lives are truly being dictated by the ticking clock, and how much are they still living in tune with the natural world? There's a certain irony in the fact that these ancient timekeepers, who helped usher in a new era of precision, might have been the last people to truly see time as something both mystical and natural. In their attempt to master time, they may have lost something intangible, the magic of living in the present moment. Historians still debate the extent to which these early timekeepers understood the deeper philosophical implications of their inventions. Did they see the clock as a mere tool for measurement, or did they perceive it as a representation of divine order? Some scholars suggest that the clocks were a way for the priests to exert control over the populace. After all, what better way to impose order than by teaching people to respect the passing of time? Others argue that the Mesopotamians were more philosophical than we give them credit for, using the water clocks as a means to connect with the divine. Regardless of intent, there's no denying the deep impact that these early clocks had on society. For the first time in history, time was something that could be controlled and manipulated. The clocks allowed the people of Mesopotamia to structure their days with unprecedented precision, whether it was for religious rituals, farming, or trade. But, like any great innovation, this newfound control over time came at a cost. The more time could be measured, the more pressure there was to use it efficiently. In this moment, standing in the temple courtyard with the soft murmur of the priests and scribes around you, you feel the weight of that pressure. The clock isn't just a tool for organizing daily life, it's a symbol of an era where time is no longer free, it's precious. Every minute, every hour, is now counted, and the people of Mesopotamia are beginning to understand what it means to live within the confines of time. But, of course, you can't help but smile at the irony. These early timekeepers, so focused on controlling the clock, are still fundamentally at its mercy. It's a gentle reminder that no matter how much we innovate, no matter how much we try to master the forces of the universe, time will always be one step ahead. We can measure it, divide it, and track it, but it's still something that slips through our fingers, just as it always has. You stroll through the city, lost in thought, as the night deepens. The water clocks have done their job, they've brought structure and precision to daily life, but there's a quiet sense of wonder in the air, a sense that, for all their innovations, the people of Mesopotamia may still be in awe of the mysteries of time. Perhaps, despite the growing dominance of the clock, time remains something far more profound than just a number. You feel this as you walk past the marketplace, where merchants have already packed up their goods for the night. The tick-tock of the clock seems almost distant now, as the sounds of the city fade into the calm night air. For a moment, it feels as though time itself has slowed down, no longer governed by the relentless ticking of the water clocks, but simply by the natural rhythms of the world around you. Historians still argue whether the Mesopotamians' early mastery of time ultimately helped or hindered their civilization. Some suggest that it allowed for the rise of more organized cities and the development of trade and industry. Others argue that the pressure to manage time created a rigid, unforgiving system that stifled creativity and spontaneity. But as you stand there, watching the moon rise over the city, you feel a sense of peace. Perhaps the true beauty of time is not in its measurement, but in the way it unfolds, naturally, before us. The clock might tick away the minutes, but the beauty of time lies in the moments between those ticks. And so, you continue your walk through the ancient city, mindful of the delicate balance between time and timelessness, and the ways in which our relationship with time has evolved, from the simple ticking of the first water clocks to the ever-precise digital clocks that rule our world today. The night air feels cooler now, the hum of the city softening as it settles into sleep. As you wander deeper into Mesopotamia, a strange peace washes over you, as if the invention of the clock had, in some quiet way, preserved not only the people's connection to time but also a sense of tranquility. The stars above twinkle softly, and the moonlight bathes the city in a gentle glow, as though time itself has slowed, allowing you to enjoy the stillness. You reflect on the path that led here, how the earliest Mesopotamians were compelled to develop a system that could regulate their world. It was driven by necessity, agriculture, trade, religion, and the very structure of their society. Time was no longer something that flowed with the sun and the moon, but something that could be controlled, metered, and used to their advantage. But even as they advanced, something eternal about the cycle of day and night, the rhythm of the seasons, remained. The water clocks, you realize, were not just instruments, they were reflections of how human beings sought control over the one thing that always eludes them, time. And yet, in the moment of using it, they still revered its mystery. Perhaps, in creating these clocks, they hoped not to conquer time, but to align themselves with it. There's a sense of awe in your heart, remembering the simplicity of the past and the complexities it birthed. These ancient Mesopotamians had no modern conveniences, no digital alarms blaring in the morning. Instead, they were woken by the slow, steady drip of water, the ticking of time through a primitive yet brilliant invention. There's something deeply poetic about that, a quiet beginning that gave rise to the frantic pace of the world today. As you continue walking through the city, the roads now mostly empty, you come across a group of older citizens sitting together near a market stall, chatting in hushed tones about the wonders of the past. One of them, a weathered scribe, looks at you with a knowing smile. "You know," he says, his voice low, "we may have mastered the measurement of time, but time itself never truly belongs to us. It always escapes, like sand through the fingers." You nod, reflecting on the truth in his words. There's something eternal in the passage of time. Despite all the changes in the world, societies evolving, empires rising and falling, inventions and technologies transforming the way people live, time remains. The ticking clock might have started with the water clocks of ancient Mesopotamia, but the idea of time, its unrelenting movement, has always been with us. As you sit with the old scribe and listen to the gentle murmur of the night, the weight of time's significance begins to sink in. The water clocks were the dawn of something great, yes, but it was also a reminder of how much time shapes us, influences us, and sometimes, even controls us. But, at the same time, they also serve as a reminder that time can never be fully controlled. It moves forward, relentlessly, but always with beauty in its rhythm, whether we choose to measure it or simply live in it. The scribe's eyes twinkle, a gentle reminder of how ancient knowledge has always been passed down. You see, he continues, it's not the time we measure, but how we live with it that matters. The clock may tick, but the moments, those are the true treasures. As the scribe's words settle in, you feel a deep sense of tranquility, one that's only possible when you stop fighting time and begin to let it guide you. The first alarm clocks of ancient Mesopotamia were born out of necessity, yes. But they also birthed something timeless, the understanding that while time may be measured, it can never truly be tamed. You rise from the group, walking slowly toward the temple once more. The soft ticking of water clocks echoes in the distance, reminding you that the night, like all things, will eventually give way to the dawn. Yet there is no rush. Time, in all its endless movement, has a quiet magic to it, a magic that the ancient Mesopotamians were among the first to discover, and that continues to echo in the lives we lead today. As you reach the temple gates, the sounds of the night grow even quieter, the city settling deeper into its peaceful slumber. The air feels crisp, cool against your skin, and you close your eyes for a moment, breathing in the ancient stillness. Maybe, just maybe, there's more to time than we realize, something that can't be measured or counted but is felt, in the stillness between the ticks, in the moments when you simply let go and allow the world to turn, just as it always has. Historians may continue to debate the impact of the Mesopotamian water clocks, but for you, it's clear. Time, whether it's marked by water or a digital beep, remains a constant in our lives, a quiet, unyielding force that moves forward, whether we're ready or not. Now, as the stars shimmer above and the city fades into the night, it's time to let go. Time will continue, but for now, you can rest in the gentle embrace of the moment.